taking the position that there are no contingent facts, and CoolDog's taking the opposition. It'll be regular debate format, just back and forth, and then if we don't get a concession, we'll just put it to a voting poll where at least 75, well, the audience who was here for at least 75% of the debate are going to be eligible to vote, and then whoever gets the majority of the votes will be declared the winner. So thank you guys for debating. Have fun. You can get into it.
Thank you very much, Stone. So the proposition is there are no contingent facts, which we could also reformulate as all facts are necessary facts. And I'll explain a little bit why I'm holding this position today. It all started when I was looking into the Leibniz cosmological argument. For those who don't know, I'll just briefly read it. I posted in chat. Premise 1, a contingent being exists. Premise 2, all contingent beings have a sufficient cause of or fully adequate explanation for their existence. Premise 3, the sufficient cause of or fully adequate explanation for the existence of contingent beings is something other than the contingent being itself. Premise 4, the sufficient cause of or fully adequate explanation for the existence of contingent beings must either be solely other contingent beings or include a non-contingent, what is called a necessary being. Premise 5, contingent beings alone cannot provide a sufficient cause of or fully adequate explanation for the existence of contingent beings. Premise 6, therefore, what sufficiently causes or fully adequately explains the existence of contingent beings must include a non-contingent being, the necessary being. Premise 7, therefore, a necessary being exists. Premise 8, the universe, which is composed of only contingent beings, is contingent. Premise 9, therefore, the necessary being is something other than the universe. And theists go on to use this argument to say that the necessary being creates the universe. And because the universe exists, we can then know that God exists. So it's a very old argument for God. Now, what this argument relies on is something called the principle of sufficient reason. And the principle of sufficient reason just on its own, let me find it. Necessarily, for every x, there is a y such that y is a sufficient reason for x. Okay, so on face value, that doesn't seem like something very controversial. In fact, the idea that there's an explanation for some fact or state in the world, specifically some type of causal fact, is what we build the foundation of our science on. A lot of our empiricism relies on something like this. And what the theist is doing is they're taking that notion and they're basically taking all the contingent facts in the universe and they're putting it into one giant contingent fact called the big conjunctive contingent fact, the BCCF. We'll probably be using that throughout this debate. And they say that this BCCF must have a necessary object creating it, and they say the necessary object is God. All right. So that's sort of the background for the PSR, how it's used, and why I got interested in the topic. I am an atheist, and so whenever I come across an argument like this, I want to figure out why it's wrong. And at first I was thinking, well, okay, maybe it suffers from a fallacy of composition, like what is true of all contingent facts? Is it necessarily true of the composite of all the contingent facts? Seems a little bit easy. And then I found this argument by Peter van Inwagen, and Peter van Inwagen is a Christian. And my apologies to CoolDog if my opening statement's going a little long. If you want to step in at any moment, you more than can't.
No. Let's get the whole thing out because I also have a rather extended statement too. So.
Okay, cool. So Peter van Inwagen was looking at this argument, and he, I can't remember the other philosophy he worked with here, but he basically came up with a reason why the PSR should not hold, and he rejects the PSR. He doesn't reject God, he just rejects the PSR. But there's an implication about rejecting the PSR, which is that there are no contingent facts. So let me go into Peter van Inwagen's argument here. This is going to be the real bread and butter of the debate. This is where CoolDog and I will probably have most of our conversation and disagreement. And I will post it in chat. So just two sources I need to cite here because these are not original arguments. The Leibniz cosmological argument I got from the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy on the article for the Leibniz cosmological argument. And this argument I got from a YouTuber named Elephant Philosophy. He does a lot of really great YouTube videos on theist arguments. So I recommend everyone, if you're interested in this, go check out Elephant Philosophy. Anyways, this is them putting down all of the Peter von Inwagen's argument. So this is Peter von Inwagen's argument, and I took this from Elephant Philosophy. It's not my original, and I'll just read the argument. Premise 1, no necessary proposition explains a contingent proposition. Premise 2, no contingent proposition explains itself. Premise 3, if a proposition explains a conjunction, it explains every conjunct. Premise 4, a proposition Q only explains proposition P if Q is true. Premise 5, there is a big conjunctive contingent fact, which is the conjunction of all true contingent propositions, and the BCCF itself is contingent. Premise 6, suppose the PSR holds. I'll repeat it here. Necessarily, for every X, there is a Y such that Y is a sufficient reason for X. Premise 7, the big conjunctive contingent fact has an explanation Q. Premise 8, the proposition Q is not necessary. Premise 9, therefore, Q is a contingent true proposition. Premise 10, thus Q is a conjunct in the BCCF. Premise 11, Q explains itself. Premise 12, but by using premise 2 and premise 11, Q does not explain itself. Therefore, we get a contradiction. Q both does and does not explain itself. And for that reason, the PSR is false by contradiction. Now, if the PSR is false by contradiction, then the implication is that all facts are necessary. There would be no contingent facts. So that's sort of the basis of the argument here. And that's why I think there are no contingent facts. And one little note, I have a third argument, and this is for premise 1, which I anticipated some disagreement on. I'll post that third argument here. It may not be the case that we disagree here. CoolDog and I went through this before. I also took this from Elephant Philosophy. And this one is basically a tautology. If it's possible for Q to be true and P to be false, then Q does not explain P. If Q is necessary and P is contingent, then it is possible for Q to be true and P to be false. Therefore, if Q is necessary and P is contingent, then Q does not explain P. And just for those in the room who aren't familiar with modal logic, necessity and possibility, the way you define a contingent fact is that it is possible for P to be true and for P to be false. That's the modal definition of a contingent fact. So that's part of what is in the first premise of this argument here. It is possible to be false. That's part of the definition of a contingent fact. So it's basically just saying if Q is true and P is false, Q does not explain P. So with that long-winded, like tons of logic thrown at everyone here, I hope you're all following. The PSR is really what this whole debate hinges on. The PSR is false by contradiction. If the PSR is false by contradiction, there are no contingent facts. There are only necessary facts. Unless you want to bite the bullet and say God exists. And that's my argument.
All right, then. So the basic structure of this opening premise is I'm going to do offense first and then defense, because it'll make it a little bit more clear. So basically, I'm going to go give you some independent reasons for why there are, in fact, contingent facts. And then I'm going to go on to the case proper. So for note-taking purposes, you should probably bracket this Arco for however you're doing it. Okay, so the first example of a contingent fact is I was watching some vintage car racing today, 1970s and 80s Formula One cars. And, I was thinking about this debate, and it came into, so like, look, there's nothing inherent within cars, within drivers, within racetracks, or anything else that would make it such that a driver will crash or that the car will fail, right? There's nothing inherent in any of that which makes it so. However, we do see cars fail, engine failures, we see crashes, we see the like. And thus, it seems very intuitive for me to say the fact that someone got into a car wreck or, a racing incident, right, that's contingent. It's contingent upon other factors because there's nothing in the specific parts which make it necessary. So this is an example of a contingent fact. Two, we see even logical relationships are contingent. If it rains, then there are puddles on the ground is contingent by its very nature. Specifically, that it is true, that if it's raining, that it isn't raining. So if it's false that it's raining, then the proposition becomes true. If both it raining and there are puddles, then the proposition is also true. But this statement is contingent, right, upon our world or the possible world of interest, right? That raining is, it's true that when it's not back up. So it's contingent upon us not living in the possible world where it's true that it's raining and it's false that there aren't puddles. It's contingent upon that. And so even very basic if then logical relationships express contingency inherently within them. It's easier to follow this if we go to it rains if and only if there are puddles on the ground, right? This relationship is contingent upon the possible world that, that there aren't garden hoses and aren't lazy gardeners who leave them on, right? However, we are in the possible world where there are garden hoses and there are lazy gardeners who leave on their garden hoses and create a puddle while it's not raining. And so the fact that, it rains if and only if there are puddles on the ground is false because it's contingent in contingency in our world, but in another possible world, it can certainly be hold to be true. Three, many things that we think are true in a necessary way, think mathematical facts in this example, or we think that they're necessarily true, right? But in fact, they're based upon axioms, which could be arbitrary or picked for good reasons, et cetera, et cetera. Thus, even mathematical truths and other sorts of things are contingent upon base level assumptions. They're not necessary at bottom. So I'd like to have some talk about the status of the argument itself. It's contingent upon some of these presuppositions. And in that case, I think it renders to show that, even if Arco wins, right, if these propositions are contingent themselves, then I'm not sure how he's getting necessity out of it. Four, another thing about it is like you gave this long logical proof, whatever, right? But the only reason that classical logic works, right, is because it's contingent upon a binary truth value system, right? If A, then B may not be true or false, but a given probabilistic value, if we're dealing with fuzzy logic, we can also add in indeterminate variables into this. So if the left side is indeterminate in a 3-value logic system and the left side is true, the whole thing will become, the left side is true, the right side indeterminate, then in a 3-valued logic system, that statement is indeterminate, right? And so even these logical arguments that we're doing is contingent upon which logical system we hold to be true and which suppositions we're going under. And then, some skepticism arguments from my boy, Sextus Empiricus. We can run more of these later. There's more. We'll get to some of the stuff here with the PSR, but the relativity of animals and humans seems to kick here quite clearly, right? Or the claim that my eyes are green is contingent upon your subjectivity, my own subjectivity, etc. However, my eyes are kind of a weird gray green color, blue, gray, green. So if I wear a blue shirt, then my eyes appears blue. Ergo, my eye color itself is contingent upon the shirt I wear, so forth. Right? On my driver's license, it says that my eyes are green, and that is contingently based upon at that specific time who the woman I asked at the DMV saying, "Hey, I don't know, you pick." Right? And so that's my eye color is a contingent fact. Okay, so going on to some of the arguments specifically. We're going to tackle the Leibniz thing first, the first argument. We can get into the weeds here a little bit more. So like looking at premise 3, the sufficient cause of or fully adequate explanation for the existence of contingent beings is something other than the contingent being itself. My answer is why, right? Why is that true? Why can't a contingent being itself explain its own existence by its mere existence? It can contingently exist or not, but the fact that it does exist, we can always envision a possible world that everyday objects don't exist in, right? And so why can't just their mere existence there prove that they do exist in this possible world, right? The real world. So number 4, the sufficient cause of or fully adequate explanation for the existence of contingent beings must either be solely other contingent beings or including non-contingent necessary being. Why does it have to be a being? Why not an indeterminate force? Why not a non-contingent force there? Why does it have to be an existent being? And if we're taking away immateriality, as this seems to start going towards, because what's causing the contingency of the universe to happen, right? Must be something that's not within the universe. And so why does it have to follow all of these rules to begin with, right? 5, it says, okay, contingent beings alone cannot provide a sufficient cause of or fully adequate explanation for the existence of contingent beings. Why don't we run something a little bit trippy and say that like the fundamental characteristic of our world and the creation of our world and even our lives itself is one of like pure contingency, right? Radical free will and all that stuff too, when we're talking about ourselves. But it seems like, our entire universe is contingent upon like these somewhat arbitrary fundamental constants in physics, right? It seems like our world is purely based upon that contingency. I don't see why we can derive that necessarily the universe has to be in this way when looking at other possible universe. So then premise 8, the universe, which is composed of only contingent beings, is itself contingent. So I don't when we're saying this stuff, I'm not sure why. So the universe, which is composed of only contingent beings, is contingent. So I mean, we can back this up and talk more broadly, which we're going to get to. So I want to bracket premise 8 and talk about some stuff that you did later with the BCCF stuff, because it dovetails very nicely with it. So when you talk about the big conjunction of contingent facts, right? The big conjunction of contingent facts, you say that is also contingent, but why? Right? Why can't, if that set is contingent, right, then you need another contingent set to keep adding on to it. But why is it the case that that's contingent? If we can, in logic, there must be a set of all possible worlds, right, for every single fucking valuable or letter you pick, right? There's going to be a set that contains all possible worlds, right? And that set isn't contingent. It's based upon like the rules of logic. Like the set itself is determined by necessary conditions, even though it contains contingency, right? So why is the set as a whole contingent is a mystery to me. So we're going to talk about the PSR last. We'll talk about the PSR last. So that was like premise 1 stuff, I guess. And on the BCCF, you say 2, no contingent proposition explains itself. I raise you A, and if A, then B, right? The conclusion B is justified and proven by the premise itself. Tautologies are another example of this that are always true, at least in binary logical systems, right? So like A or not A is true, and that explains itself. Proposition Q explains proposition P. Okay. 5. So yeah, premise 5 is also that whole point about why is the mega set contingent and not necessary. So like, let's talk about the PSR, and then I'll hand it over and we can do the back and forth thing. But when we're talking about the PSR, right? So like, first of all, let me find where I had this noted. I had a note on this. Yeah. But here, like when, I was saying other skeptical arguments, right? But the problem here is if like we're starting to reject the PSR or whatever, right? Then the problem with the criterion kicks. Like under what criterion do you have to assert that the PSR is false? It must be the PSR, which you're doing the very, you have to have a sufficient reason to reject it itself, and that sort of proves itself, right? So like rejecting the PSR is kind of nonsense, dude, because in order to reject it, you have to have a sufficient reason to, right? You have to have a sufficient reason to assert that a fact is false, right? Negations are also facts as well. So holding that the PSR is false, I require sufficient reason or explanation for why that must be the case. And Right there, you prove the PSR. Also, when we're talking about the PSR, right, I'm of the opinion, following from Schopenhauer, that the PSR is not some universal idea, right? When we're looking at things in like a scientific way, this methodology, right, the methodology of science and experimentation, call it the scientific method or whatever, in the world of science, that is the PSR, right? But when I'm riding my bike, for example, that's more of like a knowledge how-to situation, and the PSR is different in that case. In philosophy, right, the principle, what constitutes a sufficient reason is different than what it is in anthropology, for example. So it's not like the PSR is something universal, and you need to be very specific about what constitutes a sufficient reason for you to win. Like that's what we're debating about. I need to have some talk about how, one, you're justifying the criteria for people believing in your position, and then two, also saying that it can't involve any type of principles of sufficient reason. It just seems like that you're left without any real grip on people, and you lose on burden of proof reasons, right? If you can't at least make room for the possibility for people to have reasons for your case to be true, then that's like you lose on burden of proof for the affirmative, right? In my opinion. So I think I'll leave it at there, and it's a little bit messy. We can tackle it in whatever order. We can pick specific points that you want to go over, and we can run from here.
Sure. I think some of the objections you raised at their heart were kind of the same objection in different applications.
Sure.
So maybe I'll just start by saying where we agree, right?
Okay, let's see where we agree.
So you went into the Leibniz cosmological argument. You asked, why does the necessary object, say, have to be a being? I agree with you, it doesn't have to be a being. Like we can, for example, imagine that there's some necessary item that is a natural item, say a singularity at the beginning of the universe. And that would fit the role of the Leibniz cosmological argument. We wouldn't need to invoke anything like a mind. And so you and I can agree there that at best, the Leibniz cosmological argument would just show some necessary item, not necessarily a mind-independent item.
Well, I think that's wrong, because I think that, if your singularity is a naturalistic entity, then that must be contained within the set of contingent items, right? Like if it's naturalistic, then that requires an explanation.
Not necessarily, because the natural item can be a necessary item. So let me sort of, this goes into the second objection, which I think is the main objection you pose and the biggest challenge to my argument, and that has to do with entailment. So just because something relies on something else, that doesn't mean that it's contingent. A necessary entailment would itself be necessary. So for example, you talked about mathematics, right? And you said that the things in mathematics are contingent on the base axioms, and the base axioms would be things that you consider to be necessary. But because of entailment, the rule of necessitation in modal logic, things that are necessary entail other necessary facts. So there's like a necessary contingent gap at play here. So you can say that there's a reason that these mathematical laws produce whatever, but those reasons are necessary, not contingent. So this is a question of entailment. So basically, the disagreement we have is if entailment itself is necessary or contingent. And my view hinges on entailment being necessary even for contingent facts. So supposing, go ahead.
Yeah, so I get what you're saying, but I think part of your problem is you're trying to prove something outside of the system within the system. Does that make any sense? So of course, in logic, we can name a proposition as necessary, and it has certain properties within that logical system, right? But it only has those properties insofar as we choose our axioms in such and such a certain way, and that the PSR, when applied, the logical PSR, the principle of sufficient reason for logical proofs, is such and such, right? For whatever reason, but that whatever reason is contingent.
So I think on your worldview that is coherent, right? So if we suppose that the universe is full of contingent facts, then what you would say is 100% accurate and correct. If we suppose that the world is just necessary facts, then it wouldn't be contingent. It would just be another necessary fact. We might use language describing it as contingent, but the fact of the matter would be it's necessary. So my view compels me to be a hard determinist.
That's fine.
Meaning that there are no possible worlds, there's just a necessary world.
Yeah, but like that seems absurd to me because I can think of possible worlds very readily. Like I'm chiefing on my vape over here, homie, and there's a possible world where I didn't pick up that first cigarette, right? And I don't have a vape, right? There's a possible world where my water glass is empty as opposed to full, right? Possible worlds are certainly out there. Like you can't just
hold on. What do you mean they're certainly out there? So explain. I want to unpack that a little bit. So we can imagine, right, a state of affairs that are different. But what I'm talking about is something ontological, not conceptual. Okay. So there might be epistemic possible worlds, but I'm saying there's a fact of the matter. And that fact of the matter is necessary.
Yeah, sure. I think we're both in agreement here that we both think that there's a fact of the matter. I just don't know if we're ready to call it necessary or not, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, like, I get the point that you think that only one world exists, and that's fine. Like, I can be compatible with that too.
I think it could also be the case that there are multiple necessary worlds. So we can imagine like a necessary singularity and then branching out like a multiverse of necessary worlds. Like that's also something that could be possible in my view.
Sure, but like part of the point here is that like the fact that, I mean, sure, pick whichever interpretation you want. I don't care, right? Mm-hmm. For these purposes. Like, okay, but the fact that you, Arco, are in world 12 of 256 or whatever the fuck, right? Right, that's contingent based upon which world you're in.
So this is coming back to kind of like that core objection, right? Like you're saying that's contingent. I'm just going to come back and say, no, it's necessary because of the entailment problem here.
Again, but you see, like the problem is that you're drawing necessity through a system which is itself contingent, right? Like,
but again, on my view, it's a necessary entailment, not a contingent entailment.
You're rejecting PSR, so how do you get there?
Oh, I get there because the PSR induces a contradiction.
But why is that a sufficient? So yeah, but you see, okay, if the PSR is inherently contradictory, this universal mythical PSR, which, again, I reject. Okay, let's say that's in contradiction, right? But that can also, I can, then also prove that every fact is contingent through the same means, right? If the PSR is what's in contradiction, then, the whole sufficient reasons go away and I can just merely assert and we're fine because you have no basis to object.
Well, it's not true because we assert it. It's true by necessity. So there is a fact of the matter, and we could assert something as being true or not, but that doesn't make it true.
Look. So you're saying the PSR and the not PSR are both true, right? It's a contradiction.
No, well, yeah, I'm saying if contingent facts,
or all contingent, right? I could do this with add rule, right? And then it DS's itself, right? Because I also have the negation. I can prove whatever I want. Right? If the PSR is in contradiction, then we both win, and then you lose because you're the affirmative.
So I don't understand how we both win there. How you win.
Okay, look, like finishing off the proof, we have not PSR, right? And then through this disjunctive syllogism, all is contingent. You're perfectly free to replace the all contingent with all necessary because it's add rule, right? If PSR is both true and false, it's a contradiction, right? It's true that the PSR is true or that everything is contingent, right? Because I know the PSR is true.
If the PSR is true, the PSR is holding that it is contingent.
Right. And if it's false, then it can also hold that it's not contingent. Like I can do the other proof, right? It's literally the same thing, except I replace, and this is the trick, right? And this is the trick that you're trying to pull, right? It is that you assert a contradiction and then you realize that you can say whatever you want. Like once you find a contradiction.
No. So it's not, I'm not using the contradiction to say anything I want. So the point of the contradiction is to show that the reason why someone would invoke the the principle of sufficient reason here entails a contradiction using its own principles.
Right, and that's what I mean. Is like using its own principles.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, like let's look at number one. Like another example is it premise one. It's your premise about the big conjunction of contingent facts, the BCCF. Right. On one hand, you're asserting that it is the set of all contingent facts. Right. And then you're asserting that it is also contingent, and that's a contradiction in itself. And so from that, I can prove whatever I want.
So no, wait, I'm not asserting that as a fact. I'm taking that fact asserted by Leibniz.
I am under no burden to say that the BCCF is a contingent fact or necessary fact. I can suspend judgment on that.
Right, but do you grant that there is a big conjunction of facts?
I mean,
like take every true proposition, right, and then just say true proposition A plus true proposition B plus true proposition C.
Yeah.
At the end of that entire thing, you can put that in one set and say that set is true, right? That's all the big conjunctive fact is. And the question is if that fact is contingent or necessary.
I'm not sure if sets take a truth value. Or I'm not sure if sets take a truth value. They may.
But do conjunctions take a truth value?
Yeah, they could. Yeah.
Okay, so what's the difference between a conjunction of two propositions having a truth value and a conjunction of all propositions having a truth value?
If we're running it as a full conjunction, we're fine. It has the truth value of T. And assuming a binary logical system.
Sure. Yeah, I don't think that it seems to me like contradictions are impossible.
Like we can't use PSR now, right? We can't use PSR, right?
Yeah, I mean, my whole goal is to get rid of the PSR. I'm rejecting it.
Right.
I'm saying it's wrong.
Yeah, but then why does anybody in the audience have any reason to believe you?
Well, that's a different question than the fact of the matter. So there's one question about like, why would someone take on a belief, say? Right. And then there's another question about the fact of the matter when it comes to truth in the world.
You have burden of proof, though. You're affirmative, not me.
Yeah. I know. I have burden of proof. I also think you have a burden of proof of the negation, too.
Again, like...
So I think, just to be clear, there are particular things we have burdens of proof on.
Sure.
My burden of proof is not to convince someone. My burden of proof is to demonstrate it as true.
Sure. Right. But like the point is look, if we don't have the PSR, and like it's a problem with the criterion you've created for yourself with this argument. Right. And the problem is, look, you assert that because of this contradiction in PSR, because of this full set of things somehow necessarily having to be contingent in my position, which I don't think it needs to be. I can have a necessary set of contingent things. I don't see the contradiction in that.
Wait, no, a necessary set entails necessity.
Necessary facts can also entail possible facts.
So that's where you and I disagree.
If it's necessary,
I don't think that's necessary. I think necessary entailment just leads to other necessary facts.
Yeah, but like it can be necessarily true that if A, then B is possible. Right.
The relationship being necessarily true is different than entailment. So like if contingent facts are true, we could say that the contingency could be necessary, right? I'm fine with admitting that. In fact, I have to admit that in order to show the contradiction, because that's what the PSR is saying. That it is that the relationship is necessary while the facts themselves are not necessary, right?
What is, just state like what the PSR is actually doing. The
PSR the PSR is saying necessarily for every X, there is a Y such that Y is a sufficient reason for X.
Right.
So for so say X is a true proposition, X is a true proposition, there is a proposition prior to X that makes it true. It entails the truth of that.
Right.
So we can think of it like causation, right?
Yeah,
like
right.
just as a simple example, like I can kick a ball and the ball will move.
Right. But now we're rejecting this idea, right? You're rejecting it. This is false.
Ultimately, I'm saying it is not a contingent fact. So like just going back to the causation example,
Is the
right?
PSR true or is it false? Let's just get over this.
I mean, I started from the very beginning that it was false because it creates a contradiction. So like, let's go through the argument one by one. So like, for example, the first premise, no necessary proposition explains a contingent proposition. Do you agree there?
Let me see. Where are we at?
This is Peter von Ingvagen's argument.
Okay.
The one where it ends with the PSR is
No,
false.
I disagree with this. I don't think.
Okay, so this first proposition, right? No necessary proposition explains a contingent one, is the additional argument that I have.
Yeah,
So
sure.
if it's possible for Q to be true and P to be false, then Q does not explain P. Do you agree with that?
We've been over this and we said it was good. So yeah.
Okay,
But
so if you agree with that, then you have to agree with the first premise because that's the argument for the first premise.
But like this is different than like a proposition is not necessarily like an if-then statement here, right? These are you mixed up somewhere here with what you're assigning letters to, in my opinion. Because like I can have a necessary relationship, right? It can be bought, like I'll just put it in chat, right? It can be necessary that this is true, right? This is a necessary proposition, right? And if I make it even different, right? I can make it different.
What does the greater than and lesser than symbol mean?
That's if then. Oh, that's possible.
Possible. Okay.
Q is possible.
It's necessary that P implies possible Q.
Yeah, and then P is true. And then here's a different one, right? Where this will modus ponens itself. Right, and this is a necessary proposition, which is obviously a necessary proposition, which is explaining a contingent fact, which is Q is possible. You know, it's like when we look at physics, right? For example, and we say, okay, there needs to be certain fundamental constants for whatever to some atom to form, whatever, right? When we say that there's a range of fundamental constants or whatever that lead to possible formations of matter, right? Right, that's what we're saying. That if these
but that's presupposing a non-hard deterministic universe. If it's hard determined, then there isn't any contingency there. It's just it has to be that way, right?
Look, I mean, again, I'm getting my physics wrong. Okay, so like all the physics people and math people in the chat are gonna hate me, right? But let's just make up an example, right?
Mm-hmm.
In order for there to be, iron, copper, and sodium atoms, just random shit, right? In order for those to happen, for those to be possible to happen, the speed of light must be x, right? In order for those to be possible, for those to possibly form, you need this fundamental constant to be such and such, right? And so that, it's not just that sodium atoms form because that one constant is x, right? But it's also contingent upon all the other ones too.
But that just seems, I can just rephrase the same thing with necessity. In order for the iron atoms or whatever to exist, going into the fine tuning of the universe, it is necessary that these conditions take place.
Right, but that's only like you can do this, and that's fine. But like,
that doesn't refute the argument. So this is where necessary entailment is the core of our disagreement. In this argument that I just posted in chat, we went through it before. if it's possible for Q to be true and P to be false, then Q does not explain P. Do you agree with that?
No, yes, I agree with this,
Okay,
this argument.
so
Fine, but
that first proposition is just saying that that entailment is necessary.
yeah, that's for if Q is necessary, but a necessary proposition doesn't just have to be Q. It can be what I just posted. This is
Right, but if P is false, then Q, if you already agree though, that if P is false, meaning that P is possibly true or false, if it is possible to be false,
it's like your premise,
then
right?
Q does not explain P, which means that you agree that necessary facts do not entail possible facts.
Look, man. So like this is premise 2 as well, right? This proposition, this singular proposition explains possibly Q. Right?
How does it explain possibly Q?
Because look, I mean, we can do it however you want, right? So like, again, just showing it to you, you know, if this is, you know, we're trying to prove what? Possibly Q, right? You know, all we do is import it into whatever world we want. All right, world 1. James is probably beating me to the punch here. World 1, and you know, and P in world 1. All right, that's just necessary entailment. And then, you know, we simple it out, you know, P to possibly Q. And then, you know, modus ponens is. We can all see that modus ponens is.
Right, but the point is that you agree that that necessary facts don't explain contingent facts, right?
No, I think that this necessary fact does explain a contingent fact, namely Q.
So I don't understand. So if you agree with the first proposition, if it's possible for Q to be true and P to be false, then Q does not explain P.
Yeah, but my necessity is binding to something different. It's not binding to the Q or the P. It's binding
What is
to
it binding to?
itself. The relationship itself is necessary.
But that's not the question I'm asking. I'm not asking if the entailment is necessary, right? I'm asking if you agree that a necessary proposition explains a contingent one.
This one just did. Because
so I don't understand how it just did, right? Like I'm not following.
I have a proposition, right? If A then B a proposition.
Yeah.
Is this a proposition? It is necessary that if A then B. Is that a proposition?
Yeah.
Is this a proposition? It is necessary that if A is true, then it's possible that Q is true. Is that a proposition?
Yes.
Okay. There we go. Right. That's a
something being truth apt. Something being truth apt. Hold on. Something being truth apt doesn't explain why this proposition here. No necessary proposition explains a contingent proposition is false. Just because there are propositions and you can provide examples of propositions, all you've shown me is something that I can say that's true or false to. Just because I can say that a contingent proposition is true or false doesn't prove that I think that contingent propositions are possible. Right. I could be like I'm an error theorist with contingent propositions. Sure. I'm saying all contingency is false. It's all necessary.
That's your conclusion, but I'm just wondering about these premises that you have, right? These premises that you have.
It's an axiom, right? So it's the necessitation rule.
How are you proving an axiom?
I mean, I don't know what you mean by proving the axiom. Like I just take axioms to be kind of necessary facts.
Right, but like you realize that we're picking them contingently.
No. How is it a necessary fact if it's contingent? That's a contradiction.
Okay. Prove to me a necessary fact without using the principle of sufficient reason.
The principle of sufficient reason is talking about contingent facts.
No, it's not.
Yes, it is.
The PSR says it has nothing to do with contingency, nothing to do with necessity at all. All that you've said it is, for every X, there is a Y for which Y is a sufficient reason for X. You're rejecting that. So
No, so look, for every X, there is a Y. That to me is X relying on Y. Seems to me like contingency.
Sure,
Unless we're talking about entailment, which I take to be a different
you're
thing.
trying to prove. I understand what you're trying to prove. I'm asking you, without relying on a Y, prove to me a necessary fact, X.
Wait, relying on a lie?
Yeah, some reason. Without a Y, prove to everybody here that X is true. You can only restate it, right? Without the PSR, you can only restate beliefs. You can't get anywhere without the PSR.
I mean, all you've done is demonstrated that there's a difficulty with language. Like there's a difference between being unable to communicate to someone why this is a necessary truth versus like, okay, well, just because you can't communicate it, now there's a fact of the matter that there must be. Like basically your argument here right now is because you can't convince someone, therefore your argument is false. I don't see how that holds. There's a fact of the matter. There's a fact of the matter that either there are necessary facts and contingent facts, or there's just necessary facts, or there's just contingent facts. So out of those three options, right? Out of those three options,
yeah,
there's one that's right.
Sure.
Okay.
So
are you remaining agnostic on all of them, or are you saying that like there's one that's a better alternative?
So like there's two things here, right? I want to say both. Okay. The first one is that look, you have burden of proof. In order for me to win, if you're agnostic about it, I win. Right? Because
I'm not agnostic, but I don't think that's the standard. I think we should be using
if you arrive to a suspension of judgment, you should not hold the proposition.
I disagree. I think that we can use Morean epistemology here. Okay. P has prima facie plausibility. In order to show that P is not true, you need to demonstrate the falsity of P or an alternative theory that better explains it.
I want to use both. I want to say both. So okay. The fact remains, right, that you cannot prove that there are only necessary facts without relying on some other reason than that bare fact itself, right? You've posted two arguments here, which all apply, that supposedly will allow the audience to reach what you're trying to prove, right?
They're not relying on contingent facts, though. They're entailments from necessity. If because of the rule of necessitation,
I kind of want to finish the statement.
Oh, sorry. I thought you were done.
Right? We're just kind of getting there. So backing up a little bit, right? You say you have these two arguments, right? These are reasons for both me and the people listening to believe your conclusion, right? And so here, however, you're rejecting the fact that your own argument Y will be a reason, a sufficient reason for the audience and me and everybody else to agree to your X. Because you obviously do believe that Y leads to X, right? And I would agree with you, sure, right? We have arguments that lead us to a conclusion and provide sufficient reason to get to a conclusion, like yours has the possibility of being, right? But now that we've rejected that and we see that it actually has to be true in order for your argument to work, the PSR has to be true for the 9 propositions on my screen, the Y, to lead to X, we realize that there must be something else wrong with the argument, right? There must be something else wrong with the argument. And I think that this is like, we can go over it again. Like
you're conflating on reason here. So there's reason in the sense of an explanation of a fact of the matter, and then there's reason in the sense of a belief. So we can talk about ontological reasons and we can talk about doxastic reasons. Those are different arenas.
Sure.
So because I would be trying to demonstrate doxastically something, but I am not able to give a justification doxastically, that does not then make an ontological reason false. That's what you have to rely on here.
I don't really see what you mean, right? So like in both
what I'm saying
is it still holds, right? Because I don't think that the proof steps, the formal proof steps that you're trying to do are doxastic. They're purely formal, right? And when you're running the PSR within that formal realm against the formality itself, that has its inherent problem on the ontological level, not just the doxastic level, my guy.
no. So look, what I'm saying is, at best, you've said is you've given no reason for someone to believe X. You haven't showed
right
that I've created a contradiction by using an argument.
I'm not the one who's asserting a proposition here. You're asserting that there are only necessary facts.
You're asserting it's false.
Given us
there's a burden of proof to assert it's false.
You've just repeated your conclusion, and you haven't actually given, by your own admission, by rejecting the PSR. So internal to your own argument, when you reject the PSR, the premises themselves have no weight on proving X or X anymore.
No, that's not how it works. So like rejecting the PSR because of contradiction is not the same thing as my premises not holding. They hold because of the necessitation rule.
But the whole reason that you have premises to begin with are to fulfill the PSR. Like the whole reason the argument works is because the premises do prove the contradiction.
No, entailment does not need the PSR. We don't need the PSR for entailment. We can have something like the rule of necessitation.
But that's just PSR with you're just saying a different word for the same thing.
I don't think so.
Look, do your premises entail a conclusion?
Yeah, I would say that on my view, PSR, it's all necessary entailment on my view.
PSR states that Y will entail X. That's false.
Right, because, and we'll go through the argument. So where we disagree is not on the PSR, right? We disagree earlier in the argument. So talking about the PSR isn't making progress here.
No,
in order for us to make progress, we have to get through where we disagree on the first premise, which is no necessary proposition explains a contingent proposition.
I disagree with that. And I think that's why you end up rejecting the PSR, is because there's something funky with this, right? And there's something funky about calling the set of all contingent facts itself.
Okay, so that first premise, you disagree with the first premise, correct?
I disagree with the way that you're constructing the BCCF, and I disagree with the fact that a necessary proposition can prove a contingent proposition.
So first of all, I also disagree with the BCCF. It's not my construction. It's a theist construction. We don't disagree that there's a problem with the BCCF. So I just want to go through Peter von Inwagen's argument premise by premise and find out specifically where we disagree.
Yes.
Rather than sort of getting into the weeds. So the first proposition here, I'm just going to paste it into chat. No necessary proposition explains a contingent proposition. Do you agree or disagree?
Disagree because of this.
Right. So you reject the rule of necessitation. I mean, it's just like a classic logic thing.
No, I think that it's necessary that A is possible is a necessary proposition proving a contingent proposition.
Wait, why is it necessary that, hold on, that to me just seems like you're making a premise that's a contradiction. If it's necessary, it's not possible in a modal sense. It's necessary.
It's a perfectly valid operation.
But it's not sound. It's not sound, right? So you've made a contradictory proposition, which is false.
How?
If something is necessary, it is not possible. It's just necessary.
No,
possible in a modal. Hold on. In a modal logical sense, possible is it's possible, true and false, right? That's different than necessary. A necessary proposition means it cannot be false.
Is it true that
if it cannot be false, then it is not necessary that it's possible?
Is it true? Is it true that every necessary statement is also a possible statement? That's true, right?
No. Hold on. Possible is being conflated here. We have to be very clear. There's a sense of possible that is conceivable, right? Like we could imagine something. That's different than modal possibility. Modal possibility is it can be, there's one world where it's true and one world where it's false. A necessary fact, it cannot be false. That's what it means for it to be necessary. So if you make a proposition of it is necessary, which we could rephrase as it cannot be false, that so X cannot be false, can be true and false is basically the proposition you made, which is incoherent. You've made a necessary incoherent proposition, which is false. It self-defeats.
How does this show me the proof? How does this defeat itself?
Okay, so look, necessary.
Where this thing leads to a contradiction. It doesn't. This statement does not lead to a contradiction.
Do you agree that a necessary fact is one that cannot be false?
Correct. It can never be false.
It can never be false.
Possible. It cannot
right.
be
Okay. So
possible.
Right. So if it cannot be, it is not, it cannot be false. A cannot be false.
It cannot.
So what you've done is you said A cannot be false.
That's not what I said at all. I said that it must always be possible for A to be true or false. It can take a truth value, essentially. A can always take a truth value. That's all I've said. It's necessary that A takes a truth value. It is necessary that there is one possible world where A is true, which is what we do when we talk about fundamental constants in the universe, right?
But that doesn't show, hold on, that doesn't show how you disagree with the first proposition, though, which is no necessary proposition explains a contingent fact.
I have a necessary proposition.
You've just made a contingent fact. You haven't shown a necessary fact explaining a contingent
one. I can do it with my previous one.
Okay.
Right? It's the same deal. It's literally the same deal. This is a necessary proposition, which in modal logic terms perfectly proves that Q is possible.
So your proposition is just saying, it's necessary that Q is possible. That doesn't explain a proposition. Look, you have one proposition that's a necessary proposition, right? You haven't shown an entailment of that proposition.
It's inherent within it. What are you talking about?
That's not an entailment, though. If it's inherent within it, it's not an entailment.
Q is a necessary fact too. I know, James, but it's also a possible fact.
It's just no. It's all you've done is just showed necessary entailment, which we don't disagree on. You haven't shown that the first proposition is false, and you have to.
Explain. I think that necessity entails contingency.
Okay, but now you're doing what you accuse me of doing, which is just repeating the claim.
Right, exactly, because there's no why that I can throw at you, and there's no why that you can throw at me that will be a sufficient reason enough to believe either is true.
Okay, so.
Right? Am I wrong? What why do you have to prove this X? You don't have one.
No, that was what the other argument was, right? So
yeah, and you see, this is the point. This is the problem, right? Is we have no criterion for which to determine.
No, we do. I'm using the rule of I'm using the necessitation rule.
Okay, so why is that a good rule? Why do we believe in this rule?
I don't see how that's relevant to the proposition. Like we're getting into like the reasons for belief, which is different than facts of the matter.
Yeah, but they have to vote in the end.
Yeah, of course.
They have to vote in the end. So, they better believe that their vote is right.
Right. But you agree with me that axioms in mathematics and logic are necessary facts, right?
I don't know. Why?
You said it earlier in the debate. We can roll the tape back. Roll the tape back.
Yeah, we take them as necessary, but I also said they're contingent upon us. I also said that.
So okay, this is where I think the language gets a little tricky.
Yeah.
So something can be reliant, right? It could be an entailment of something, but that doesn't make it contingent, because contingent means it could be false, right?
Yeah.
So there's a possible world where these necessary facts are reliant on us, which are also necessary facts, which would just make it another necessary fact. We have two competing worldviews here.
We can perfectly have a discussion right? It's fine. We can have a discussion without the rule of non-contradiction. That's perfectly possible. Why are we choosing that over another?
It's conceivable. So we can conceive of something, right? There's an epistemic possibility, but we're talking about
Yeah,
ontological possibility.
sure. But you see what I'm saying though, right? Is that all this whole discussion that we're doing, right? Is I think contingent in itself, right? We could have decided not to have it, right?
But that doesn't demonstrate that it's contingent. That's just a way to describe it, where you, in a worldview where you think something like that is contingent, you would describe this as contingent. In a worldview where it's hard determinism, we would find it to be necessary.
But in your worldview, no set of propositions can explain its conclusion. Like, that's the difference.
They're just entailments. Yeah, there's no explanation.
That's silly. And
it sounds like, I understand it sounds silly, right? Like I'm sort of with you there. It sounds absurd because I grew up in a system thinking that there are contingencies, right?
What is the substantive difference between an entailment and whatever the fuck the PSR is doing? What's the difference?
The difference between an entailment and the PSR. Well, the PSR is just a proposition on its own.
Sure.
But an entailment would be something that follows from a proposition. So that's sort of what I would see as different.
I mean, if I have a sufficient reason for X, that seems like Y is entailing X to me.
Well, but also, like, when it comes to entailment, I think an entailment is slightly different than. Okay, so assume for a second like a contingency. In a possible world, we might be able to say something like an implication, but it doesn't mean that that it's entailed. Like, I wouldn't consider. I'll give you an example using God, right? So using Leibniz's argument, and he would say that God is a necessary being.
Okay.
And if we hold that the rule of necessitation works, then it means entailments of the fact of God's existence would make those other facts necessities, right? But we could conceive of a world where God does not create the universe. So that's the explanation for why the universe would be contingent on God, rather than it being an entailment of God because he doesn't have to make the world, at least conceptually, right? So that's one of the workarounds around, like, the theists will use to try and get around this idea.
This seems like an argument for me, though. The fact that the world is contingent upon the necessary being seems like we have a necessitation, and whatever the force is, could be natural entity, whatever the fuck, right? And this is going back to P5, right? Who was going to be happy about this, right? Is like the necessary being for Leibniz is essentially kind of like your BCCF, right? Am I wrong about that? In your world?
No, the BCCF is separate. It's not an entailment of the necessary being for Leibniz.
Right. But it's kind of in the same function, in that you cannot have a list of whatever contingent facts, right, explained by another contingent fact, right? That's like what your argument is trying to make, right? That you at a certain end point, you have to end on a necessary fact, right? That seems to be like both Leibniz's and this's argument, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's either the case that the universe has a necessary fact, or it's an infinite regress of contingent facts.
Right. But you see, that's the problem, right? Is because you have a premise in your argument which says no necessary proposition explains a contingent proposition. And it seems like the story that we're telling is exactly that, right?
No, so that proposition is compatible with both worldviews, right? So, like, if it is an infinite regress of contingency, then that proposition, the first proposition, is true. It just happens to not be the case, because there would be no necessary propositions.
Master Uguay just misunderstands Arco's argument. Like you're trying to prove that there is a necessary fact at the end of the day, and so that's the thing that you're picking for a contradiction.
I'm not necessarily trying to prove there's
but like three
necessary
is like kind of a contradiction in your worldview. Sorry, five is kind of a contradiction in your worldview, though.
That's what it's a reductio ad absurdum. The whole point of the argument is to demonstrate the contradiction.
Right.
That the big conjunctive contingent fact is not a contingent fact, but a necessary one. And if it is a necessary fact, then its entailments are necessary.
But like the fucking problem, dude, is that your whole argument is filled with other types of, like, you're claiming that the PSR is also wrong with this. And you're claiming all these other propositions are wrong with this. Like every proposition, according to you, is demonstrated false because they lead to this contradiction. Like, why are you picking one proposition to be false over all the other propositions to be false?
Well, because of let's go. Okay, so we can't get past the first premise.
Yeah.
But maybe let's just entertain for a moment. Just hold that it's true. Okay. If it is true, that no necessary.
I want to ask. So, like, you know what indirect proofs are in like logic, right? It's where you have like a list of,
I don't know it in indirect.
I'll describe it to you. So the way this normally works is reductio ad absurdum argument. Right? The way it normally works is you have your propositions at the top, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then you have your conclusion, right? Your first assumption is the negation of the conclusion, right? And that negation of the conclusion is what's supposed to get you a contradiction. So I'm asking you, which of these premises is the assumption and the argument that is the linchpin that is making this thing go into contradiction?
Meaning that it would be that the BCCF is not a contingent fact.
Right, that it's a contingent, but you see, here's the problem though, is that when that's true, right? When that's true, your premise one becomes false.
How?
Because then we have the necessary fact of the set, right? Explaining why we have all of these little contingent facts.
No.
Why not?
Because number one does not imply the BCCF.
Right, sure. That doesn't matter.
I think it does, though.
But the thing is like, okay, so like premise 5, right? What's causing the thing to come into contradiction, right, is premise 5, right?
Yeah, is that the conjunction of all contingent facts, A plus B plus C is a contingent fact.
Right. So we've proved.
So do you hold that is a contingent fact?
Okay. Listen. I don't have to hold that every fact is contingent. I don't have to hold that.
I'm asking if you do, though.
That every fact is contingent? No, I do not hold that.
No, the conjunction. Take all the true.
I don't think I have to. I don't think I have to hold that.
I'm not asking if you have to. I'm asking if you think that the conjunction of all contingent facts is a fact.
I mean, I can say yes to this. I think I can say yes to this.
Okay, so you at least agree in part that there is a BCCF, but you're agnostic on the nature of the BCCF.
Right, sure. Who cares, right?
Okay.
The point is that like that doesn't matter. Like that's why I was saying I don't have to hold it. It doesn't matter.
But I think so. I'll try and.
Here's what does matter, Arco. What does matter though is, okay, I'll grant you that that's fine, right? The BCCF is a necessary fact. Okay, right? Let's grant that. But then here's the problem: is that necessary fact of that set is proving all the contingent facts that compose it through P1, right? Against P1.
Okay. The whole point of the argument is to show that would be contradictory. So,
but that's not what the proposition of the debate is.
I know the implication of its falsity leads to the proposition. So, you grant that the BCCF exists, that there is a fact that it's the BCCF. Okay.
Sure.
Do you accept that the BCCF is either contingent or necessary?
Yes.
Okay.
That's easy.
So it's one of those two.
Sure.
Okay. If premise 1 is true,
If
where
premise
no necessary proposition explains a contingent proposition,
right.
and the BCCF is necessary,
True.
then the BCCF would not explain the conjunction.
Right. Now I'm asking you, why is premise 1 true? And you give me the sub-argument, but I think like the very
I think it's just axiomatic on my view, because it's just
like
it's just the laws of logic.
Like the problem is, the fact of the matter is that's what the theist wants. Like that's what Leibniz's argument gets you to, right? Is that all of our possibilities in life are created by God and this immaterial force, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not married to God here. Like on my view, it could just be some necessary object.
Whatever necessary object, can be the BCCF even. Yeah, who cares?
Yeah, it could be the universe itself.
But like the problem is that with necessity also comes with it the contingency. Like that's kind of the point.
So that's not what I'm understanding. And this is sort of the heart of the disagreement. Like on my view, I hold that the necessitation rule is true, and you don't really care about it. So what's the reason for accepting some laws of logic but rejecting others?
Well, again, this is the point, right? We need some, this is the whole skepticism point, the problem with the criterion and the Sextus Empiricus shit, right? Mm-hmm. This is this whole point, right? Is you can't use a criterion itself to prove the criterion that you're using, right? And that's where you get, and I think that's the window of contingency.
I'm not using the laws of logic to prove the laws of logic.
Yeah, but
so I don't understand the problem of criterion. I guess it's unclear to me the problem.
It's very unclear again. Are you rejecting the PSR or not? It seems like you are accepting it.
Okay. If I hold that the PSR is true.
Right.
Okay. And I also hold that the BCCF exists.
Mm-hmm.
And it either is necessary or contingent. If I think it's one of those two, right? If the BCCF,
I think I understand.
Yeah, if the BCCF is contingent, right? Like just conceiving of it as contingent, by using the PSR, we get a contradiction.
Yeah, I understand that. Okay, I think I understand better now. You're too squirrely on the PSR point, man. You just have to accept it as true. Okay, let's think about it this way, though. I'm still so every fact is a necessary fact in your view, right? Nothing is contingent. Yeah. How do you prove these necessary facts? Because it seems like the whole world is a blooming, buzzing confusion before us.
You can't, but if it's a necessary fact, there'd be no proof, because a proof would make it contingent.
Right, and that's the problem. Right, is we need proof. We need proof in order to prove things.
If it's necessary, so if, just for a moment, imagine that the universe is necessary.
Correct.
And because it's necessary, there would be no proofs. Why would we need a proof then? That's question begging.
Right. The other way to think about it is why do people see things so differently? Right, if everything is necessary, why don't we really know what the shade of red is?
It's just a brute fact that they see it differently. So that we can't know.
Yeah, but you see, this is the difference, right? Is some facts are not brute facts, right?
Well,
some derived facts.
Hold on. On my view, it's all necessary. You're saying just basically what we're doing is there are competing worldviews, and your worldview is but it's just a fact that it's contingent, and I'm but it's just a fact that it's necessary.
See, the problem is that it seems to me the very brute fact that we do iterations and we do proving and we do all this other shit, right? It seems like the brute fact that we need all of this stuff is because of contingency.
So the explanation why contingency isn't the explanation why contingency isn't necessary there is that in a world where it's necessary, it would be necessary that we would have this urge to satisfy, and the way to satisfy that urge would be engaging in this type of conceptual game. And so we satisfy that urge by doing that conceptual game. It doesn't mean that contingency is now needed.
This is kind of a reductio to absurdum. Now the argument is shifting on my end a bit, right? And so I'm trying to appeal here to just the way that this process gets cashed out in reality, right? The way that this worldview meshes with the reality of, being human or whatever the fuck, right?
Mhm.
It seems like that, we have huge potentiality to missee things, to think wrongly when doing logic, to missee a ball as a strike, for example, right? As umpires, right?
Yeah.
It seems like that our world is just filled with this stuff. And I don't understand through what process from such a contingent being, right? From such a contingent being that can err in its own reason, even its own deductions, even that we arrive at some ultimate and necessary facts, that we've proven the existence of of everything being necessary, when the way that we're doing that itself is full of this error, right? People aren't perfect, and that seems to be a proof of contingency upon sound mind, for example. Like your ability to grasp this argument is contingent upon you not being a certain such and such a way.
It's
right?
contingent if you presuppose contingency, but in a necessary world, it would just be a fact that I would understand it, and it would just be a fact that we didn't prior to certain conditions. But it doesn't, just because we can conceive of an account where contingency would explain things doesn't refute a necessary account. Like, it could be the case that the universe is hard determined. From the very beginning, it was just billiard balls hit, and there's going to be a fact of the matter in the future that will be the case. There's no possibility. The future is not open here.
I get it. You're hard determinist. I get it.
Right. But so your explanation is just repeating this claim of a contingent universe. And you're saying, well, because assume a contingent universe, it proves there's a contingent universe. That's the exact same. It seems to me like the exact same thing I'm doing. Assume a necessary universe.
Yeah,
it would prove a necessary universe. Except there's a difference. In my account, a necessary universe can't be false, but in your accounts, it can be false.
Yeah, it just seems to me that like your starting point is just like in Plato's heaven, and then you're trying to prove, what's going on down on Earth, right? And it just seems to me that just runs like this idea just runs directly against the actual way that we do this type of reasoning as like embodied people, right?
Yeah, I mean, it is
like against everything that we see and through our senses, which is supposedly what is to give us these necessary facts, right? Our senses, our own human physical brain is supposed to be what allows us to get this necessity, and it's like that's just so errant and so mortal and so plagued with finitude.
It seems to me like it's only an error in a world where there is freedom. So, for example, if I believed the future was open, and if I believed that I had free will, then it would be an error with those beliefs. Right. But I'm not holding those beliefs, so I'm not an error. So when you say it's an error, it's only an error in accordance with some beliefs that I just don't hold. So it's not a problem for my view.
Let me ask you this, though. Could you be wrong about one of the things that you believe to be necessary?
I mean, it's possible I could be wrong, but that doesn't mean that there's a fact of the matter. Doesn't mean that there's a fact of the matter that's wrong.
I get it. So what is it that's making you wrong in that? What necessary truth is making you wrong in that?
In what?
In your judgment about some fact that you don't know, that you thought you knew but didn't know. Like, what's making you err in that?
It seems to me like it would be a few necessary truths. It'd be a necessary. So it would be the truth that I believed X, and the truth that X is false, and then the proposition that I came to understand that X was false.
Yeah, but how do you know that? That's what I'm asking. Because it seems to me that it would be the same type of thing that you were wrong about in the first place. Right? It's the same sort of reasons that you're wrong about thinking, I don't know, just pick a belief, like law of non-contradiction.
Yeah, but I guess the question is, so like, it's,
so I could be wrong
if I'm
that. Same knowledge that I know for why I'm wrong about thinking that the law of non-contradiction is false is the same reason that I know that fact. Right?
Okay, so if I'm understanding you correctly, it seems like you're asking me what the justification is
Correct.
for this belief, right? But
Correct.
just because there may be a lack of a justification doesn't make it false.
Sure.
It's all right. So, I mean, it seems like that's getting into a different topic of the debate where it's like, okay, what is the justification for X belief?
But that's the point of having a debate, is to air justifications. And you have burden of my proof, my guy. Like
I mean, the burden of proof comes down to that argument I posted earlier. So you agree that there's the BCCF exists.
Yeah.
Okay. And if the BCCF exists, it's either necessary or contingent.
Right. And I hold that.
Okay. So now
I hold the disjunction.
Assume it's contingent. Assume the BCCF is contingent. In such a world, if the BCCF is contingent, it would create a contradiction.
Right. So it must be necessary.
Exactly. If it must be necessary, then all facts within it are necessary.
But they're also
that's the proof.
Yeah, sure. But the whole you've just proven that the set as a whole has to be necessary. You haven't proven that each individual fact can't also be possible, because you're holding that there's no contingent facts at all. Right.
But on my view, entailment is necessary.
But the whole thing that's making this work is the fact that you have contingent facts in that set to begin with.
Assuming contingent facts, assuming the collection of contingent facts, they are either necessary. That collection is either necessary or contingent.
The real problem here is that we're putting the modifier of contingent upon that set instead of necessary. If we put it in as necessary, then we don't reach a contradiction, right?
No, the problem is the disagreement over no necessary proposition explains a contingent proposition. That's where we disagree.
Here's what we're doing, right? You have set of necessary, right, where we have contingent fact A, contingent fact B, contingent fact C. This is what you've proven.
I mean, hold on. How have I proven that?
Because when that set is necessary, right, we're fine, right? I agree with you. We're fine in this situation. We're fine here, right? But this is all that you've proven. Sorry, that needs to be a parenthesis instead of a.
But it's okay. So it's true propositions.
Yeah, sure. They're all true. Yeah.
Right. Okay.
It's true that A is possible. It's true that B is possible. It's true that C is possible.
That's different. I'm just talking about the true propositions.
Yeah. This is the set of true propositions. Yeah, sure. It's necessary. Yeah, it is the set of true propositions.
So it's not a set of it's possible A is true or false. It's a set of true A, true B, true C, true D, true E.
Because the BCC whatever is a list of contingent facts. It's a conjunction of contingent facts, right? That's what it is, right? And we've proven that conjunction of contingent facts is true. Ergo, we've proven that each individual contingent fact that is true, meaning that there are contingent facts, namely all of the things in BCCF.
Go through that slower.
Okay.
So just make it like premise 1, premise 2, premise 3, like super simple.
Right. The BCCF is the set of all contingent facts. Conjunction of all contingent.
Well, what's the difference between a set and a conjunction?
There isn't really. It's a conjunction.
Okay. It's a conjunction of all contingent facts.
Conjunction
of all contingent true facts.
All contingent true facts. Right?
Mhm.
We have proven that that set of all the contingent true facts is necessary, correct? Correct?
Yeah. Okay. So it's a
But
necessary fact.
we have proven that it is necessary that A is a contingent fact and that B is a
We have
contingent.
proven that A is necessarily true because it's the
We-
true
no,
facts.
we've only proven that each member of the set is true in all possible worlds is true.
And right. So if
What
we've proven,
what is the item that we are proving? Well, that is contingent fact A, contingent fact B, and contingent fact C. We have proven that those contingent facts are necessarily true. Thus, I claim victory.
but that's a necessary truth. Okay. That's not thus you've claimed victory because no necessary proposition explains a contingent one. If it is a necessary fact,
Necessary. It can't be necessary then, because
how can
is
it not be necessary?
Contingent facts.
Hold on. It can't be necessary because how? That's not an explanation of how it can't be necessary.
Well,
That's just a naked refutation. It just can't be.
It is a necessary proposition that is claiming that A is a contingent fact. And it's saying that that's true.
That's not, no, hold on. The proposition isn't claiming that A is contingent. The proposition is claiming that A is true.
Right.
So you haven't shown it's a necessary fact it's contingent. You've shown it's a necessary fact it's true.
No, because look, what is your BCCF made of? What's it made of?
It's a conjunction of true facts, contingent facts in this case, because we're assuming we are operating from a world that is assuming contingent facts.
We have proven that the conjunction of all the contingent facts are true.
Okay,
right.
let me ask you a question. If a fact is possibly false, but we know it's true, does that mean it's possibly false now?
Yeah, we know well, no, not necessarily.
Okay,
no,
so
no,
this
no,
is the key point here.
Possibility does not entail the possibility of its negation. Does not entail that. All that it entails is that there is one possible world, or there is a possibility, or depending on the contingency of the matter, there's a possibility of it being true. That's all that it proves. Is there's one
right, but this isn't a conjunction of it's possible it's true. It's a conjunction of it is true. So take a fact. It's saying take a fact that can be true or false. Take the affirmation of it. Take the fact of its truthness, and that is the conjunction. It is not a conjunction of the possibilities. It's a conjunction of the truth.
So it's this now, right? I'll put it now then. What it is. So this is what it really is: A or not B, or not A, or not in, or right. So this is what we've proven.
A or not A?
Yeah.
Or in or not? No.
Yeah.
No. So this is what I think. This is what I think we've proven.
I know that's what you think you've proven.
I mean, that's what the premise is.
Okay, well, what is a contingent fact under your view?
A contingent fact would be it's possible that P or not P.
So let me have the contingent fact of it's raining outside. All right. It's a contingent fact, right? So it's possible. So what we're saying is when we have a contingent fact, raining or not raining, this is what a contingent fact means. Right.
Right. So that's the quality. So that's the quality of the fact, right?
Right.
But
Exactly.
We're not taking the category of a quality of the fact, but we're taking the fact of the matter. So instead of saying it is either raining or not, take the fact of the matter and make a conjunction out of that.
This is a bait and switch then.
How is this a bait and switch? It's in the premise from the very beginning. Take all true propositions. So
Yeah,
there's a
but
quality of the proposition.
Right.
There's the quality of the proposition, and then there's the fact of the proposition.
right. If you're right, yeah, sure. Like, but again, the quality of the fact, rather quality. Sorry, I was chiefing the vape there. The quality of the fact doesn't change. God damn it. The quality of the fact doesn't change, right? You have
Wait,
to
what do you
show
mean the
quality
quality?
of the
I'm
fact.
saying that I'm saying that
A
I'm
true
saying that
contingent fact is still a true contingent fact.
a true contingent fact is still a true. Okay,
What?
yes, you're right. You're correct. A true contingent fact is a true contingent fact.
Right? It's still contingent. And so then I win.
Hold on. Why do you win though?
Because sure, your argument proves that there are necessarily true contingent facts. Yay, whippy.
No. So if
Yay.
look,
One contingent fact. At least.
okay, so you agree that the conjunction is necessary.
Yeah.
Okay,
Sure.
if the conjunction is necessary,
Right. I have proven that there is necessarily contingent facts.
if the conjunction is necessary, then it
Right.
doesn't explain anything inside of it. Meaning,
What?
sorry, hold on. Let me go through that.
Yeah. I think I got it.
It's part of the later part of the argument. So if it's necessary,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I've proven that there exists true contingent facts. What a great defense for me. Like, yeah. GG. I don't know. I think that's GG.
no, okay, so it's the second premise. No contingent proposition explains itself. Do you agree with that?
Sure, but we're not talking about a contingent proposition. We're talking about a necessary proposition.
Right. Okay, so if the BCCF is a necessary proposition, it doesn't explain itself.
Why not?
Because of no contingent proposition explains itself. You said that was true.
Necessary proposition now.
Right.
So it does. It can. That's only about contingent
Right.
fact.
But if it's a necessary propositions don't explain contingent propositions.
But why not? I think we just did it. Like, I think that's false.
Okay.
Again,
But but you don't disagree. You agree with this conclusion. Therefore, if Q is necessary and P is contingent, then Q does not explain P. If Q is the BCCF and P is a contingent fact in the BCCF, then the BCCF doesn't explain it.
Yes, but I think this is rejecting PSR.
What do you mean? That it shows that the PSR would entail a contradiction.
Right, which is wrong because the PSR is true.
No. Just because it's true? Like, why is it just because it's true?
Because, dude, like, again, don't reject the PSR, my guy. Don't reject.
Wait, hold on. That's just repeating the claim, CoolDog. That's just repeating the claim.
If PSR falls, then I win. So, like, you have to claim the PSR is true, right?
Wait, why do you win if it's false?
For skepticism reasons, dude. No. Look, so I'm doing another style of proof.
Skepticism reasons, like how does for skepticism reasons mean you win? Just because you can say like I'm a skeptical, I win. That seems like a trump card. That's not really charitable in the debate.
Well, yeah, but listen. Let me show it to you this way, right? So, like, let's assume that the PSR is true. Okay.
Okay.
So let's just grant that as P1. PSR is true, right?
Okay.
Now, let's assume that what you're saying is that Q can't explain P, right? Let's see that, right? It seems to me, right, that will cause a contradiction with the PSR.
Yes.
And I think we all believe that the principle of sufficient reason is true, right?
No, I don't.
I believe that What, dude? That's insanity, dude. You can't reject PSR, man.
I
That's not-
can. I'm rejecting it, and I'm saying that the world is hardly determined. I'm biting all the bullets, CoolDog. It's coherent.
but no, dude. Like, but then again, you're affirmative, right? You're affirmative,
Uh-huh.
and you're
Right.
essentially saying that I'm going to assert this belief, and this goes to the justification point, right?
Okay, so in the two
So
premises you
reject
provided,
PSR.
right? In the two premises you provided, we either have to say Q cannot explain itself, or sorry, Q cannot explain P, or we have to say the PSR is true. And you're just saying, I'm going to go with the PSR is true and
Right.
reject Q cannot explain P.
Right.
And I'm saying the PSR is not true and Q can explain P, and it can explain it in virtue of it being a necessary fact.
Like
I've provided an account where it can explain it, it's coherent, it's plausible. So using Morean epistemology, you have to show the refutation of that.
Okay.
Not just saying, I'm going to go with one being true and two being false.
Sure. So like here's the problem though, right?
Mm-hmm.
The problem is that when you reject the PSR, every statement becomes a simple statement of belief. There's no connecting tissue between the two anymore. And that's the very process by which we came to the recognition that the set itself is a necessary fact, right? Because this P1, right, you're using the PSR in order to get to the fact that this set of contingent facts is true. You're using the PSR to do that. And then with your other hand, you're claiming that it's a contradiction later in the argument, right? After you've done the trick with PSR, right? Then you're just asserting your own belief and saying, oh, by the way, guys, that whole thing I did, right? By the way, it didn't actually work, right? Because the PSR and P1 would be in contradiction from the get-go.
Well,
the reason contradictions are bad. The reason contradictions are bad, Arco, is because of the PSR. That's why the contradictions are bad.
No, I think it's bad because of the law of non-contradiction.
Right, but like the PSR tells you that you have reason not to believe X because it runs against the law of non-contradiction. That's what.
But also a world that's necessary. A world that's necessary. I wouldn't need the PSR. Like I wouldn't need a sufficient reason. It would just be a fact of the matter.
Right, but now it's just mere assertions. Now you beg the question with every word because there's no connection between what you said at time.
I would say, in a necessary world, the contingent person is begging the question for contingency over and over and over again. It's just a necessary fact.
I understand that, but it doesn't seem why I can't say in your worldview, right? As long as every fact is necessary, we're happy, right?
But us saying it doesn't make it a fact.
Why doesn't it make it a fact?
Because there's a fact of the matter. Like if we said it and it made it true, if we said it and it made it true, that would make it contingent on what we would say. That would be the justification. But in a necessary world, it wouldn't be true because of me saying it.
Yeah, there's absolutely no justification in Arco's worldview.
Yes, there are no justifications.
No justification. If you believe there's justification in the world, then I win. You know, but like again, we're coming to the point here where I just think that the offense for rejecting the PSR is so strong that it's absurd, right? If we can't find something which will give us reason to believe X, that is sufficient for us to know that X is true because of a Y, then I mean, why not?
No, but that's sort of an argument from agnosticism. That's like saying because we don't have reason to believe God exists, therefore God does not exist. That doesn't follow.
No, I hold the disjunct, man. I'm the negative. I hold the disjunct, dude.
Right, but you just said because we don't have reason to grant the PSR is false, therefore we shouldn't grant it.
God, like PSR is so useful. Like PSR is how we get up every day, dude.
But the PSR being useful doesn't make it true. Like there's so many things we find useful that doesn't make it true. Like we could say that like I could think of my ancestors being in the kitchen with me and guiding me cooking, like that's useful. but that doesn't make it true.
The output of your worldview is just goddamn depressing, and it's just terrible.
But that doesn't make it false. That doesn't make it false, CoolDog.
Yeah,
all you're saying is, "Wow, I don't like it."
But you shouldn't believe it, man. And you shouldn't vote for it, man. That's terrible. Jesus.
Okay, well, CoolDog. I'm going to concede because I think you're right. I don't think this argument holds at all.
Let them vote. Let them vote. I want to see the vote. Let them vote. Never concede.
Are you sure? Okay, I won't concede then.
Yeah,
all right, I take it back. Please do not consider that in your considerations. We're going to go with the vote, but I'm pretty sure. I think it's already ruined, though.
Well, just because you think you lost doesn't mean you lost. I think I lost every other debate. I thought you were winning there for a minute. For a hot minute.
No, I mean, we can go to a vote.
I had a lot of fun.
Dude, this debate is like, it's so annoying, but it's really interesting.
It's very annoying. It's fun though. It is fun though. I see what you're saying, dude. Like it's pretty slick. It's pretty slick.
I think